This episode of Scrolling to Death is sponsored by Bark Technologies. Bark offers parents advanced content monitoring for all of your child's devices. Bark is literally helping to save lives and has alerted parents to millions of life-threatening situations like self-harm and severe bullying. More on Bark in the episode notes. Okay, so welcome. I have Todd today, the host of the Ranch podcast, which is the podcast in the state of Idaho. And we've been touching base on a lot of different things. But one thing that we're kind of both hyped on that affects both our personal life and our professional life, and it's part of all these conversations, is screens at school. You know, your kids are a little bit older than mine, so they're 8, 10, and 13.
Yes.
Is this something you became concerned about through their experience with school-issued devices and phones at school, or is this something that came to you through your conversations? Like, how did this start for you?
Bro, it was a rough one. So we were a no tech household. My wife and I are not big techies. And I had from a younger years, I kind of had video game addiction in my family. So I'm like, hey, no big deal. So we didn't play a lot of tech. Obviously through, the issue we experienced over the last 5 years, everybody became a tech family, because unless you were on tech, you weren't going to be functioning integrated in an integrated manner with your community and your education. So
yeah.
Obviously, the kids start getting on iPads over, the time of remote schooling, and it clung like a fungus. And it was all of a sudden the whole nature of the free app and the free game system and the hey, in-app purchases, and we're not spending money on in-app purchases. And because of that, they were just getting the whole mantra became this app is free, this app is free, this app. And so again, we got into this cycle that I think a lot of parents across the country fell into. And I was not happy about it, but it was it happened so abruptly. And then it was kind of like a figure in our house. It was really tough. So we moved from Northern California to Idaho in the beginning of 22. And we already had our kids before everybody went on lockdown. We had our kids in a private Catholic school. So we weren't on remote learning that long. We were, but it wasn't that bad.
Okay.
But even with that, my preschool kid was getting reading time on an iPad. It was the most atrocious
craziness.
We moved to Idaho. Idaho had really led the charge with opening schools back up and making masks optional. And we had heard really good things about the school districts, public school districts. And we're like, okay, great. Let's go into the public school districts. And it was amazing because they're like, oh, and by the way, you get this one-to-one device. And I was like, I do?
That's amazing. Oh, you do?
I was like, that's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, right. It's for me. So because the school we were in before is we had to supply our own iPads. So I'm like, wow, this state is really making investments in education. That's awesome. Which is actually interesting because Idaho ranks really low in funding for schools, but they're actually not bad in schools. So US News has them ranked, I think, overall 18th nationally for schools. And I think they're 11th in higher education, but they're 50th in funding. Anyway, I digress.
Wow.
So we moved to Idaho. They get these one-to-one devices and they start using them. And it's, fairly innocuous to start. And they're like, okay, charge your Chromebook, whatever it is. And I start up the podcast pretty shortly thereafter, about mid 22. And I start inviting in, various people. As you know, when you start a podcast, you're like,
whoever I can get. Yeah.
Whoever will talk to me.
Yeah.
So it's this painful process. And you see people in the local area, because we had moved to a new area. You saw interesting people pop up in the local area. And one of those guys was this guy, SRO Dave Gomez. And he had all of this information about tech stuff. And I didn't know anything about Gomez. I was just my wife kept telling me, hey, you should check out Gomez. You should get Gomez on. So I'm doing a bunch of interviews and I'm, trying to work my way up to the mayor. It was my big goal for 24, or 23. And kind of midway through 2023, some things started happening. And those things included me seeing, I believe it was my kindergartner at the time or first grader at the time, hanging out on his Chromebook at school. So my wife and I volunteer at the schools, math or whatever it was. And I realized that the Chromebooks were starting to get used not for specific sniper level assignments, but they were getting used as classroom management.
Yeah.
And so if he finished an assignment really quickly, he could have free Chromebook time. Now, here's the kicker. The free Chromebook time wasn't hey, jump on Prodigy Math or something like that. He was literally watching Odd Squad on the PBS Kids Suite on his school administered Chromebook in class in first grade.
Okay.
And we would see him because we'd be volunteering. Like, what?
And that was like, okay.
What?
The teacher wasn't like, hey. It was
Exactly.
okay.
This was not an objection. This
Yeah.
was not something where it's like, hey, buddy, like you're in trouble. You lose this for a week or something. It was, he put on his headphones and nobody knew. Now juxtapose that to the scene with, from Pursuit of Happiness when, you know, Will Smith is dropping his son off at the daycare and they have a TV on and he's like, oh, can you have them doing something other than watching TV? And they're like, it's, you know, the Navy. And it was Love Boat. Anyway, the point is, we understood, you know, like 20 years ago that having a kid sitting in front of a TV was a bad idea if he's in an educational setting. And here my son was on a school administered Chromebook in school watching Odd Squad, which is disgusting because I hate Odd Squad, and he was at school. And then I met Gomez. Okay, now Gomez comes in, me being the idiot I am. Okay. I don't know Gomez is like this national authority on school tech. I knew he was like trying to raise awareness. I had only seen him on Instagram. He comes in, I'm like, hey man, like I really love what you're doing on Instagram. You're putting out these messages about safety and stuff. Like I'd love to help you. And he's like, oh, have you seen my stuff on Facebook? I'm like, no, I don't hang out. I don't hang out on Facebook.
He's like, I'm going to help you.
Dude, he had 250,000 followers on Facebook. He has more than the local KTVB news station.
Oh my God.
And he travels the country and the world at times educating people about tech awareness. So I had this conversation with Gomez. It's bonkers. Like, this is wild. He educates me on Snapchat. He educates me on Instagram, on all of the things that I kind of knew. Like, everyone knows lightweight that Roblox is dangerous. Very few people know exactly how and exactly why. They just know it's like, it's not the best. And he started educating me. He's like, no, this is why. So because I was interviewing him, I had already interviewed other law enforcement agents, people running for sheriff and different, police people. Yeah. And I was also interviewing school people. So I started asking the police people, I was like, hey man, this is an SRO from, a little ways away. Like, does this happen in this school district? And every single time the police are like, oh yeah. Like, okay, what do you mean? Oh yeah. They're like, oh, we don't just have personal tech problems. We have school tech problems. And I was like, hang on. What do you mean? And they went on to articulate, listen, we have Chromebooks from your kid's school district in our evidence locker right now in crimes.
For what?
Crimes,
For what?
Against children. So in predation cases. So
children being groomed or preyed upon or sexually exploited through the school issued devices.
Yes.
Okay.
And I was like, how do you mean? Like, I had to ask several times. I instantly, because again, the Ranch podcast, it was always focused on like a broad spectrum of issues. So law enforcement, education, state, local politics, fish and game. So because I had contacts in all of these various law enforcement, either departments or offices, I started calling around. Like, hey, could I get the number for your ICAC? That's Internet Crimes Against Children. Can I get the number for your ICAC guy? And, the police chief would be like, oh yeah, here, call this guy. Or like, oh yeah, here, this is the guy. So I'd call them and I'd ask them the exact same thing without fail. Every single one said, yes, we have school administered devices that come through in predation cases against kids. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is unbelievable. I instantly call my school board and say, hey, did you know? They're like, what? We've never heard about this. And so this started this gigantic movement to, oh my God, here's this massive hole in education. We are funding, taxpayers are funding technology that is funneled down to the schools and then distributed to children in the way of internet-based technology that everyone knows is not 100% secure. Everyone knows it's not secure, but very few people recognize the depth of the insecurity. Most people think that kids can get on their Chromebooks and watch like some YouTube videos and, bad YouTube videos, distasteful, horrible, whatever, but not like you're getting hurt. But in reality, what was happening is that predators were figuring out ways to connect with kids through the Chromebooks, and they were acting. And so it's like, okay, well, what do we do? Right. So what I went to Gomez, went back to Gomez and I had him on a couple of times. I'm like, Gomez, we need to educate parents. He's like, well, that's all well and fine, but like where and how? I'm like, well, look, the primary problem with education for this is that you have a lot of groups that do in-person education, right? Like you'll have a group that comes around and, everybody meets in the gym and it's Tuesday night, 7:30. And that's actually, I saw Gomez at one of them after I had done interviews. I was like, oh, Gomez is great. And the things they say are real and they are true to the 40 people that show up.
9 at mine. There was 9 and I was one of them and I requested that it happen.
Right. So maybe you got it. Okay. Look, there were 9 of them, you and 2 of your friends guaranteed. So there were 6 people that you didn't directly ask to come.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So these in-person presentations, although they seem like something that are really effective and really community building, they miss the mark hardcore with actual information distribution because you have to overcome geographic and temporal proximity. Geographic, you have to be at that gym, and temporal proximity, you have to be there at the same time. 7:30 on a Tuesday, come on.
I know.
That's a really heavy lift.
Yeah.
So the education that he was trying to get out was this like antiquated education. I was like, well, what if we could do something that actually got pumped out to the kids? And he's like, yeah, that's all well and fine, but like that doesn't exist. I was like, well, why not? He was like, I mean, it doesn't exist. And part of the reason it doesn't exist is because people didn't know that they needed it, right? Most people get some piece of school-based technology at the beginning of the school year and they sign like a little waiver. They're like, okay, I accept responsibility. And that's it, right? They don't realize that they're accepting a piece of technology that actually has real risks. They think the obligation is on them to keep the device safe. You can't leave it in the car in the sun. The battery will blow up. You can't drop it. Like you're blah, 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 blah. But in reality, they were accepting this black box that had untold risks associated with it, right? And we needed to educate them in a mass scale. So Gomez and I started working on a platform to educate parents. And that was the key. It's like, this is a parent-facing tool. Everyone goes after educating kids. Everyone's like, we just need to explain to the 12-year-old why pornography is bad. Now, listen to me. I've never been a woman. I never will be a woman, but I can tell you that I was a 16-year-old dude. And there is nothing you could have told me as a 16-year-old young man to be like, hey, this is a bad idea. Like I had a Honda Accord, a 1988 Champagne Honda Accord, and it was a manual. It was wild. It had 4 horsepower. And I knew that I was not supposed to burn out on the Honda Accord at the stoplight. And I did it anyway. Front wheel drive, burned it. That's the same thing with kids. So it's like going after kids and putting the safety in the kids' hands and putting all our hope on kids doing the right thing. That's a failed system. So let's go after parents. So we made a series of educational videos that focused on 4 particular things. We said, look, if we have the most limited amount of time possible, what would parents need to know? They would need to know, 1, what the actual risks are coming off of personal and school tech. Okay, not just personal tech. Everybody likes to talk about cell phones. We remove the cell phones from schools and then we hand them a Chromebook.
Right. Thank you. Right. Same.
And yeah, it's bonkers. So they need to know the actual risks, which include drugs, human trafficking, sexual assaults, like things ending up in suicide, which you have brilliantly covered time and time again. People need to know that. That's the first piece. Then they need to redefine what social media is. It is not an app. It is not a collection of apps. It's a function of any piece of tech. Because social media at its core is just two-way communication. That means anything that offers a review site is two-way communication. So if you use Google Maps and you look up Milk Island, it's like some ridiculous location off the East Coast. You have porn in the comments and reviews of Milk Island. It's unbelievable. And like they scrub it constantly, but people keep coming back and posting stuff and there are like links to other terrible things. So you need to redefine it. This includes the Bible app. This includes the Fitbit app. The Fitbit, amazingly, they tell you when you get the app, they're like, oh, and we have this incredible health community. It boasts like 2 million people.
Oh, geez.
Like, oh yeah. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm this young person who's overweight. And like, oh my gosh, we're here for you. We support you. Like, oh yeah, I got new running shoes. Awesome. Like, what do your running shorts look like? Oh, awesome. Like, do you have a cool dry fit shirt too? And it goes like that. And parents get these apps and get these devices for kids thinking they're innocuous and they're not social media. Two-way communication is social media. So you have to tell the parents what the real risks are. You have to redefine social media so they get a broad idea. You have to articulate the mechanics of how these things work, because at the core of it, you need internet, you need tech, and you need a platform. You take away any of those things, nothing can happen. Like do this. go home tonight, take away your kid's cell phone, kill the internet in your house, and tell them to get a hold of a family member. If you kill the internet,
right.
If you kill the internet, you can't do anything. Like you can't even signal for help. And so helping parents understand, it's like, these are the three big things you need. And then finally, best practices. So, and these were best practices that were articulated by in collaboration with the ICAC departments and all these different things, which is, okay, if this happens, do this. If this happens, do this. And, this is how you can ward against it. But that's what we effectively made. And then we gave it to the state of Idaho. So we said, look, here's a problem. And I'm not going to ask you, Idaho, to foot the bill for this. What we're going to do is we're going to give this to you. Just put it into play. And I met with the State Department, the superintendent of education, Debbie Critchfield, and she instantly got it. She's like, okay, like got it. And we actually have a bill rolling out right now that has robust support from the Idaho School Boards Association, from the State Department of Education, from any told numbers of legislators that says, hey, look, if you are a public or charter school in the state of Idaho, you are required to provide education to parents, a digital platform, an online platform that they can access from their phone, they can access from wherever they are, zero barriers to access. You are required to provide that to them. Now, do they have to consume it? No, but you have to provide it to them, because at the end of the day, it's the state of Idaho that's handing out this technology. And Superintendent Critchfield got it. She was like, look, this is a problem that we have come to. Like, let's own it. Let's get after it. Like, let's fix it. So I'm sorry, that's like the long story of how you and I eventually got connected, because it's like this wild journey over the last 2 years.
Yeah. And I have a lot of questions in there. So when you bring this though to the state or like the Department of Education, I'm assuming, and you're telling them more about these problems, also, in addition to educating parents on them, shouldn't they take some responsibility for the fact that they're handing these devices to these children and making these harms available to them? Like, did they make any changes to make them safer?
I really want to make it clear.
Yeah.
I'm not anti-public school.
Yeah.
I love tech. Like my 13-year-old, I bring him into the studio to do podcast editing because and I get him on, and like we're utilizing tech. I'm in for functional tech. Okay. So let me be clear on that.
Yeah.
And I do not think there's a single school district in the state of Idaho that engages in classroom management with tech as a policy, right? That doesn't mean it doesn't happen. But I think, like, again, they understand. And in fact, I talked to some people in my school district. They're like, yeah, look, I'm sorry to hear about that Odd Squad thing. Like, that shouldn't be happening. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Thank you. It is happening.
Right.
So like, let's take that. There's what we're saying should be happening than what actually is happening. So that's a consideration. They go to work every single day. And I've talked to a lot of school tech people. They go to work knowing that they're going to open their email box and they're going to find new holes, and they're going to have to patch the holes instantly.
Yeah.
So they are working every single day to make the tech safer. But at the end of the day, there's an admission and an acknowledgement that needs to come from the state that says, hey, we know there's no way possible today to make this 100% safe. We can make it 99% safe. We can make it 98, just like driving a car. You're never safe in the abstract in your car. There's always a risk. So yes, they are going to work every day, but they still are handing out, imperfectly secured pieces of technology. And at least in the state of Idaho, the only one in the nation that I've heard of, Idaho is saying, okay, look, we see it. We got it. Like, we'll take care of this. And at the very least, if we can't make it 100% safe, but we can make it as safe as possible. And then we can reintegrate the parent into the safety mechanism, because parents at this point have been removed from the safety paradigm.
Yeah, totally. I wonder if more parents are, learning about these things through your courses or whatever education the schools provide, if the parents are just going to start saying, that's not worth it. Like, I don't want them on it then.
That's a great question. And I think it's one that we are going to find out, because I have heard from some people in the education world, right, broadly, and they might be an education advocate, or they might be engaged, professionally in education. But I have heard broadly, that there might be this problem, like, well, we don't want to articulate, in a loud way problems here, because it might make problems for the schools. And it's like, okay, that may be true. But like, isn't that the right thing to do?
Yeah,
anyway?
We have to do that anyways.
Right. And, again, I am pro, like when I graduated from high school in 2000, I could code in 2 different languages. I could make like, X-Wings in 3D Studio. Like I really enjoyed, I had a website. Like I really enjoyed tech, right? But the tech of 2000 or like 1996 when I got my 486 computer in my room, that tech is not the tech we have now.
Yeah.
Like that's just not it. So whether or not there is a cost benefit analysis that comes out positively for the schools, it's not on me. Like I didn't make the tech. I didn't make the problem.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get people to know there is a problem.
Totally.
And if the government or school districts know about it, you have an obligation to warn the parents, right? Like we get people to sign waivers going to the zoo. Like we're taking your kids, we're transporting them on a bus. It's pretty safe. It's not 100% safe, but like, no.
So doesn't it seem obvious though, like if you can't make the device 100% safe and you're aware of that in the school, you're letting parents know, a simple adjustment would be to use it later, use it less, set really strict rules that we don't use the device in downtime. We don't use it as a reward. We use it as minimally as possible because the more time the kids spend on it, the more access they're getting to all the bad things. So are you seeing any movement to like shift the approach a bit to less use of it?
What I can say for sure is that I see administrators, I spoke with one just a couple of weeks ago. This administrator in one of the school districts in the area said, hey, look, we are suffering from real school administered tech addiction. Okay, not tech addiction on a phone. Like, yeah, tech addiction on a phone is a problem and everybody knows that. And we have, the vaults on the door and we have, check your phone and all these things. But then we hand them this Chromebook. And so he has started seeing addiction to the Chromebook. For instance, he was he's an administrator and he was teaching a class. And this kid left the class to go get his Chromebook. And he's like, hey, Sparky, like, come back. We don't need the Chromebook. It's like, no, I need my Chromebook. It's like, you don't need your Chromebook.
Yeah.
This is pen and paper today. We have no utility for your Chromebook at all. And he's a big hulking guy, ex-Marine. And the dude just left. The kid left and went and got his Chromebook. And he's like, what just happened? Like classroom management has never been a problem for me. And you just took off. So there are administrators and school districts around here that are starting to realize like, okay, we have to do something about this. And parents are coming to him asking for specific plans to address the addiction to school technology. They're acknowledging like, okay, I can't get my kid off of the Chromebook. Like, please don't send the Chromebook home with him. Or like, please don't let him have it in passing periods when he doesn't need it. So there's one particular kid actually checks the Chromebook into the office in periods when he doesn't need it. And if he doesn't check it in, somebody goes out and grabs it from him.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So there are people that are acknowledging, hey, there's a problem here. Like we got to walk this back, but we don't have the tools right now in place. Like we were talking, this particular administrator and I were talking about like, what if there was a program that was essentially like one of the old railroad switch stations, right? So you saw every single Chromebook in school. Okay. And as the Chromebooks were going into classes that were registered to need the Chromebooks, the Chromebook turned on, right? And you saw this, little switch flip. And then if you're in a class that doesn't need it, you switch it. Now it's a pain initially to get everybody scheduled, inputted into the program, right? Yeah. You figure out some way to do it. But once you have that, and you could have an override that the teacher has in the classroom, like she has a copy of the program, just flips it for her class.
Interesting. Yeah.
But the point is you could control this tech addiction and prevent it from being abused, prevent the technology from being abused at lunch, prevent it from being abused in passing periods or in periods that you shouldn't have it. Like if you're trying to play trumpet, like you don't need your Chromebook to work while you're playing trumpet, right? Like, so there are ideas that are starting to get floated out.
Yeah.
But I think most of the country and most of the state of Idaho, frankly, which is the only thing I care about, most of the state of Idaho is so focused on cell phones.
I know.
That personal tech, that it betrays the reality that it's all tech, personal or school administered.
Yeah. Pausing here to remind you, if you don't know already, that there is a safer device option for your kids, safer than an iPhone by far, and that is the Bark phone. If you don't want your kids signing up for social media or accessing inappropriate sites, an iPhone is not going to do it. The Bark phone starter plan comes with talk and text only. And then if and only if you're ready to start integrating some social media access, there are advanced plans available that offer social media, but not without your approval. Plus, it has advanced content monitoring built in, which will send you alerts of potential dangers. So when it comes to a basic phone that won't distract or addict your child from healthier activities, the Bark phone is where it's at. But if your child already has an iPhone or an Android and you don't want to switch it up, at least layer on the Bark Parental Controls app as a baseline. You can set rules around screen times. You can block certain websites and apps. You get alerts of harmful content coming their way and a ton more. And if you're interested in a watch for your child, please check out the new Bark Watch. Yeah. Well, because you're talking about Chromebooks, but at my school, our public school, they use iPads, right? So they're just a big iPhone. They have all the same exact things. The kids are finding their way onto Pornhub. They're finding their way onto, well, YouTube is just allowed, but anything they want. They're watching NFL football games in the middle of class.
We have to get away from the idea that like an iPhone, just because it has a phone, like PHONE in the word, that it's a phone. Like it's a full computer.
Yeah.
Right? You can hook up a Bluetooth keyboard. You could hook up, like you can do whatever you want. So the iPad being a large phone, no, the iPad is just a slightly larger computer. Right? Yeah. And then the Chromebook theoretically is even more robust. But you're absolutely right. Like there was did you see, I don't know if I sent it to you, Gomez and I did a video on the fortifyyourkids.com website that showed how this kid went through like a 14-step process to go from ABC mouse to unfiltered YouTube. So he was able to go through these steps, and this mom had sent it to Gomez over Facebook. Yeah. And it's unbelievable. It's this elaborate process. But if you leave kids on an iPad 3 and 4 hours a day, they're going to start hitting every single button and every single option and finally find their way there.
Yeah. So one obvious solution to me is like a different company creating a school safe device. And I floated this to Bark Technologies because I'm like, if we can give our kids a device that comes empty and they only add on the things they need for school. Now, the problem is there's fuzzy lines about like some kids do need to get on the internet to look something up, but only that thing. And then how do we keep them off of all the other areas? But I think creating a device that was made for schools and to keep kids safe at school and getting rid of the Chromebooks and the iPads would be a lot safer. Now we have governmental contracts with Apple and Google that, $30 billion or something a year for this technology. So that might be a big lift, but it's the problem are the adult devices we're giving to children and trying to lock down unsuccessfully.
And look, the heavy lift of creating a new product would be astronomical. And the hardware is essentially irrelevant compared to the software.
Okay,
right?
sure.
And we could make a software that we modify in real time every single day, right? Like that's a thing. So just imagine cutting down where it's like, okay, I had the executive director of the Idaho ICAC coalition come in, and he was saying, look, between 12 and 4 a.m., those are the most dangerous times of the day for children. They go wandering, they're curious, they go onto the internet, and surprise, surprise, sex predators don't generally have 9 to 5s that they like studiously go to bed at 10 o'clock to wake up in the morning fresh to. So they're hanging out on the interwebs, like waiting for these kids to come on between 12 and 4. Let's start with common sense things. Okay. If we know we have a device that's dangerous 24 hours, and especially when parents are sleeping, let's start modifying the device so it no longer functions. Like, what's the argument for having a school Chromebook that turns on after 10 o'clock at night?
Nothing. They can't be.
Right. And people will say, hang on, what if somebody's working on it? Fine, that's on you. Like, there are restrictions in the world like that we've been able to educate kids successfly for a long time without 24-hour internet-based technology.
Without any internet-based technology,
right. Like we can do this. Like,
right.
So I think one of the ideas is first recognize that creating a new product would be exceedingly difficult, and the product would be irrelevant compared to the software on it. Because that's really what we're talking about. And even innocuous software like Google Meets, right? Or Google Classroom. Like Google Meets is really rough. So there's a guy, district safety officer in one school district near me. And I was talking to him about this, talking about the program and everything that we're doing. And he said, look, we caught kids on school administered Chromebooks on Google Meets, right? Not a crazy program, not one that sent off warning bells, doing unspeakable things on Google Meets because they had figured out how to connect with each other. They had internet, they had cameras, and they took it to the next level. So that's the kind of thing where you're like, all right, hang on. Like there's no software that's like, let's start restricting 24-hour access down to like appropriate access, right? Let's start there. Let's kill all of the cameras. Like if we have a $30 million contract for these Chromebooks or whatever tech, it's like, can you send us one without a camera? Like, I don't understand the need to have a camera.
You're totally right. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like, can you just blur over it? Or like,
Yeah.
have the school do that. Like, have the
Yeah.
school.
You can disable the camera. Maybe not on Apple devices, but you can disable the camera on lots of other devices.
Right. So let's start putting some common sense. Here's one for you. Is there a clock on any Chromebook? Okay. And what I mean by that is I go to my pediatrician. My pediatrician's like, "Hey kid, how much time do you get on the, Chromebook or on tech?" Right. And they ask me, they're like, "All right, dad, like how much time do you let your kid have?"
Yeah.
And they're like, I don't know, like none. Like my kids have a Super Nintendo upstairs. It's fantastic. We actually just bought a gangster Atari. Like we're going to play Joust and stuff.
Cool.
It's gonna be great.
Yeah. I love that.
Anyway, the point is they were like, okay, well, American Association of Pediatricians or whatever it is says that you can, you really should only have like an hour and a half to 2 hours of screen time per day, blah, blah, blah. Great, whatever. And that ratchets up as you get older until you're like an accountant and stare at a screen 10 hours a day. Fine, no problem. But they don't have in schools anywhere in the country that I'm aware of a restriction to how much a school can request a second grader be on a screen. Okay. There are no restrictions. Yet the American Association of Pediatricians is telling me as a dad, like, hey, don't go over this number. That's really, really bad. I'm like, okay, great. I'll take it seriously. Go off to school, kid, and you're on it for 4 hours. And then
you know what happens, what they say, because I interviewed a woman that started a new school it's called 2 Hour Learning or Alpha Schools. And it's like a 2-hour AI led program in the morning. No credentialed teachers. You're on the computer for 2 hours going through this AI program. You're doing all your academics within that 2 hours. And then you have like life skills workshops the rest of the day that are led by adults. They don't have to be teachers. But I asked her about screen time. I was like, so you think, because she offers TK, and I'm like, so TK, 4 and 5-year-olds are on the computer for 2 hours a day. And she's like, but not all screen time is created equal. That educational screen time is different from, scrolling on YouTube or an addictive social media app. And I don't think the studies differentiate. Like when I was working on a template today, actually for parents to request like a certain amount of screen time, like a screen time limit at their school, and pulling the research, and like it doesn't differentiate between an app that says it's educational, which those research are funded by the app itself. So how is that not biased? But it's not differentiating. Like screen time is screen time and can lead to mental health issues when used excessively. Can parents check screen time on their kid's school issued device? Because, don't Apple products make that available now?
I don't know. For the Chromebooks, I have not seen anything that would allow us to do it. I'm not saying I'm an expert on that.
Yeah.
But one thing, if I may, with regard to the educational technology.
Yeah.
Just as you're saying, there's no differentiation. And it's like, look, the concept of drill and kill is like a big thing, but drill and kill for me back in the day was doing like multiplication tables. So 100% of my time was like 100% just looking at these numbers and trying to like, do them out. Yeah. Now with educational tech, they don't just give you a screen full of numbers and ask you to work it out. They offer you a game. So they entice voluntary participation.
Yeah.
The games themselves become addictive. Not that, and like, maybe you're getting a little bit better at your multiplication tables, and like, I'm all for that, but the game becomes a problem itself because they just want to play the game. Right. And, yes, it's encouraging. It's like, get the right answer. You get more like power, and then you get like, you can go fight the monster. And, again, like I know these games, but that's not the only way to learn multiplication tables. And two, you cannot tell me there's not a trade-off. Like, I don't know anybody who ever got addicted or got in a screaming argument over doing multiplication tables on flashcards. Right. But I personally, as a parent, have had to ward off tired and exhausted 6, 7, 8, 9-year-olds that want to play the game on their school administered technology to like get better at math. Right. And they're like, no, you can't play it. Like it's 8:00 and they like flip out. It's like, it's not about the math. Like this is about the game that they're playing. And we couch it in this educational opportunity and education for everyone. And like, isn't it so great? It's like, I don't know that that's bared out in either results or in, psychological studies.
No, because if you gamify everything, they no longer like, life is boring. Life is hard. Work is hard. Like work is not gamified. Like they get a job and they're going to have to do paperwork that's not gamified, or like fill out forms or do spreadsheets. Like that's not, like nothing is gamified like that in real life. So if they don't ever develop those skills to work through something that may be boring or difficult and not exciting, they're going to miss out on developing those skills, and they're going to struggle. And so, yeah, I don't understand the gamified learning thing. And we should be not rewarding kids with like virtual rewards for accomplishing something. Like you should have intrinsic rewards and like, you got it right. Congratulations. Like a human should be telling you, congratulations, and you get a score, but it's like a grade, not these virtual trophies. That just doesn't map out for me.
Listen, I very much agree. And like one of my big life transitions was I went to Berkeley and I was on the rowing team, and I had not rowed before. It was oppressively difficult. And like rowing is just, you sit in a seat, you're facing backwards. You can't even see where you're going. And you just row.
Have you seen that movie, by the way? What's that movie about rowing?
Yeah. Boys in the Boat.
You don't like it?
I can't. I read the book, and it pretty much parallels like my life trajectory.
Oh, really?
Like, for the first month of my time at Cal, I was sleeping on the boathouse floor.
Oh, it was too real.
Like, it's too much, man.
Okay, got it.
And I rowed for 4 years, and it was like, rowing is really, really hard. Right?
Yeah.
And Berkeley, UC Berkeley, which is obviously the University of Washington and UC Berkeley, have the second oldest college rivalry behind, I think, Harvard and Yale in the country's history. So going onto the rowing team and cutting my teeth on that for 4 years, where it's like, you just sit here and you focus on like one movement and you polish that stone for 4 years, and you have it's not fun. It's not like this great thing. You learn how to work. And that experience in my life was absolutely a turning point. It's like genuinely marked me and allows me, for instance, now to wake up at 4:30 in the morning and come to my studio editing, podcasts with the governor or, senators or whoever it might be in the dark by myself with nobody telling me like, good job. So yes, I deeply agree with you that the reward to some degree, as we're developing, maturing, functional, integratable adults, needs to be, it's not necessarily fun, but you did the good job. And like, that's what you should feel good about. And I'll pat you on the back, but I'm going to pat you less on the back, and I'm going to pat you less until you're just like, I did it. And I don't even care who knows I did it. I did it right. And that's what we want from our young people.
I don't even care who knows I did it. I love that. Because when people need to like get all of this positive feedback when they do one thing, I'm like, I can't. Like just
like, oh snap. The pain of starting a podcast. That's why most podcasts only last 6 episodes, right? Because like you do your first one and you're really excited and you're like, this is so great. And you send it to all your friends and you get like 60 people to watch it.
I was going to say 50. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like 50 people. And then you're like, awesome. I'm doing another one next week. And they're like, awesome. I really hope you keep this up. You do the second one and it goes out and like 20 people watch it. And then you see your friend at the coffee shop. You're like, hey, I did that. Like, oh, I know. I gotta listen to it. I'll get to it. And you're like, yeah, get to it. And you hit the third one. And then like, you're kind of annoyed because nobody watched the second one. And then by number 6, you're like, nobody even cares. And I don't care. It's over, but that's why most people don't make it, because they need that feedback, right? They need that validation. And we have to work away from that, because as the things that will really matter are things that you just have to believe in and keep going in a vacuum. And you're like, we can get there.
Yeah.
Like, we can get there. It's going to work. Like, keep going.
Yeah. And I mean, learn to celebrate the wins too. Like, that's something I don't do a lot, but I need to get better about. But I think like recognizing wins within families can be something you can do as a family. Like, it doesn't need to come from technology. So I think I can do better about prioritizing that too, even with the kids, as an example of like how we celebrate together as a family, rather than just being rewarded virtually, I guess.
Oh, that I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Like, that's the best. Like, we have we do the same thing at my house. And it has to be this thing where like they bring home, like a math test. I got 10 out of 10. It's like this math test on paper, and we're all hooting and hollering at the dinner table.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful thing to see it light up in their eyes.
Yeah, because you also don't, I'm pretty quick to ball things up and be like, I can't do all this paper. But acknowledging the 5 out of 5 is really important. And
got to, baby. Sit there and cheer.
I know. Well, because I interviewed an expert in like grooming behavior, and she wrote a book called Duck, Duck, Groom, Anna Sonoda. And she talks about like when she sees her kids after even the school day, she gets overly, weirdly, annoyingly excited to see them, because she wants them to know that they are loved, and they she wants to make sure they don't need that from somebody else. So if you're not giving that to your child, they may go seeking that from someone else. And that's what like groomers do, is give them that attention that they're kind of might be lacking within their family unit. So
Yes.
just like that interesting reminder of like, be annoying, like be so excited for your kids' little wins.
No, I was just going to say, if you're not talking to them,
Yeah.
I guarantee you there's some adult ready to
Someone-
talk to them. If
yes.
you're not like, great job, kid. And I'm not saying like you should get a participation trophy.
No,
but like
no.
you need to have that connection with your kids. So if
Mhm.
another adult offers them, it's like anything else. Like if they're not getting their bucket filled, like the bucket, like you fill my bucket, that kid's book. That's the thing. It's like, you got to fill the bucket, and it's not just all sunshine and roses, but it's a connection. It's a real connection that they can rely on. So they're not out seeking it from somebody else. And that doesn't mean people won't try, but they at the very least won't be super or hyper inclined.
Eager for it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I'm sorry.
Well, I want to know, because I have been struggling as I like learn more about the school issued tech from my interviews, and started investigating my own children's school issued devices and found some problems within their devices at the public school. So I just worked really hard to get them in a school that is low tech, or even no tech up to like 3rd, 4th grade, so that I can put that aside and not worry about them, but also put a lot more energy towards fixing the like larger problem. So were you able to do something similar? Like, how do you manage the fact that your kids have access to these things that you know are harmful?
Yes. That's a great question. So I think my older child is managing it pretty well. Like he told me in the car, he's 13. He told me in the car a couple months ago, he's like, Dad, I have to tell you something. And I was like, oh no.
Also, yes, he's talking to me.
Yes, I know. And it was great. It was like, Bud, just what happened? Like, what's going on? Because I was ready for the bad one. He's like, at school on my Chromebook. And I was dying. I was like, my hands are sweating in the car. I was like, what happened on your Chromebook? He's like, I've been watching some Star Wars videos on YouTube.
Oh, like, cute.
Yeah, but he, so he manages it. He has a good compass. Okay. That's great. But for my younger two, for my 2nd and 5th grader, there was a point when we just said, like, we were having behavioral issues. We're having all kinds of problems. My 5th grader was very honest with me. He's like, dude, I play video games every day at school. Oh, my gosh. And he's very bright. So he's very bored. Yeah. And, the GATE program that they offered to him was not really doing much. Like, what wasn't challenging him. So we were very fortunate. The superintendent of the state of Idaho is very pro charter school. Okay. And we happen to have a charter school that's a Hillsdale model, a classic academy. Up close to us. And what we were able to do is move my 2nd and 5th grader, who were both, again, not best served by this unlimited tech atmosphere, up there. And that's a no tech campus. And boy, oh my God, it's great. Like, first off, any kind of behavioral issues or problems that we were worried about or tracking all but disappeared.
Oh my God. So
they weren't getting fired up over the technology. Homework was coming home. There's no option for video games at school. We know that for sure. So we don't have that concern. And they had homework, like classic homework, like diagramming sentences and stuff. It's like, okay, here we go.
Amazing.
And so we as parents, we are able now to insert whatever level of technology we feel is appropriate, which is, again, we have like a Super Nintendo, console. So they play like Star Fox and stuff.
Yeah.
And even that, you have it sparingly. So we can insert it knowing, okay, if I let them play Street Fighter for like an hour, like, I'm not saying it's great, but 1, I know it's only an hour or whatever time frame it is. And 2, I know it's not an hour on top of the other stuff. And that's really a key piece for us. So again, I think it is really kid specific. I think it is school specific. As of now, like, I have a mix in the, neighborhood public school and then the charter school. But I do see a marked improvement in my two children that did go to the no tech charter school.
That's amazing to hear. And ours is a classical model too. I don't know if it's like the Hillsdale model, but I'm hearing about more and more parents kind of seeking out a lower tech option, because when I talk to parents about like screen time, I'm like, well, you have to consider how much they're getting at school, and you have to be more conservative in your home because of what they're already getting at school. And so you don't even get to maybe do some of that exploration with them at home, because I don't know, like, I was just like, I can't add two hours. Like, that's insane for a 1st grader. So I'm really glad that there are options available, and I recommend that parents just like look into that. I mean, definitely go to your school, go to your teacher, talk about screen time, talk about these issues. And I'm looking forward to learning more about the bill that you are proposing in this Congress and potentially having it. Have you talked to other states about like introducing it within different states all at once?
That's a great question. So I'm the Idaho State PTA legislative rep.
Right.
I'm not here in that capacity, to be clear.
Sure.
But, but there are states that I'm trying to get a hold of through that network actually pretty quickly, because the state PTA does back this bill as well. And it has been presented to some of the members of the national PTA as well. And there are states like, I believe Montana only meets every other year, and they're in session right now. So I'm trying to get this bill in front of them to say like, hey, look, I'm not telling you what you should do, but this is a problem. Like, I guarantee you want to find out if it's a problem. All you have to do is call your local sheriff, do a Freedom of Information Act if they don't want to talk to you, and just ask if any crimes have been charged, using school technology. And they will tell you like, okay, yes or no. And odds are it's going to be yes. But yeah, so the bill itself, I have not had the opportunity to really integrate with the other states, primarily because we've been working on revisions in the state of Idaho and working with the State Department of Education to make sure that we get all their feedback, bringing in all the stakeholders and making sure everybody's on the same page. This is not an anti-tech bill. This is not an anti-public school bill. This is a
education.
Yes, we are giving your kid this thing. And just like we would with anything else, it's not 100% safe. And we want you to know that first. It's not 100% safe. And we want you to know why and what you can do about it. So again, that's what we've been working on. Okay.
So I'm hopefully going to meet with my newly elected rep, Derek Tran, in DC soon, and want to get an updated version of your bill. And then there's some other things that different parents and groups are working on related to like phone-free schools, social media-free schools, bills, things like that. And, for parents who are not involved in legislation, like, do you have one or two recommendations for how they can kind of improve safety around their kids' school-issued tech?
Gosh, man. So I was just having this conversation with somebody the other day, just because of the nature of what I do, having the podcast that really focuses on Idaho broadly, right?
Yeah.
And like, again, I've had like all of the people in, which is fantastic. And I have access that like no one else has. And I was having this conversation, which is like, look, it's unreasonable to expect somebody to reproduce, on their average, like some just working Joe, to reproduce what we are doing here. The number one thing I would do is start asking questions. All right. You have to start understanding, okay, when is tech used? Is tech available 24 hours a day to my kid? Are the cameras turned on this? What monitoring programs do you have? Do you have any recorded instances of danger from this technology? Go to your local sheriff, go to your local police department, and in good faith, just ask, do you guys have this tech in charges, against predators or something against kids? Like, just go and ask them. And I find a lot of times when I talk to school boards, all of the school boards, they either know there's a problem and they're trying to figure it out as quickly as possible, right? Like, I do not think that school boards are populated with people that are like trying to hurt kids in the least. They are all in it 100% unequivocally from the people I've met. Okay.
If anything, they're just uninformed. Like, they're just think that tech is they're still, 5 years ago, like, tech is going to say, like, these kids are going to be digital super learners. Like, we need to get more online. That's what I'm seeing in our school board situation.
Yes. So don't go at this accusatory and angry.
Right.
Go at this asking questions. Get data from your local law enforcement agencies. Understand what the school is doing. Just like, it's another very scary safety topic, but people want to. Same thing with lockdowns. I interviewed an SRO and this guy who made the protocols for essentially Idaho recently. He's like, look, ask questions, understand what they're doing, and just articulate your feelings on those things, and in the most respectful way, because the number one thing schools will do is they will turn off if you come in hot and like pissed off. And I'm not saying there isn't a place for that eventually, but in good faith, attempt first, like, hey, here's a problem I see. Can we get this fixed? Because I don't know that there's a world where we're ever going to get rid of the technology in our public education. So we have to start patching the holes as quickly as possible. But ask questions, inform your fellow parents, and start working towards resolutions with your school. Parents need to be back at the center of the safety conversation. And if you as a parent aren't trying to insert yourself into that conversation, nobody else is going to. So
Right.
ask the questions about what the schools are doing to keep your kids safe and expect good answers. And if they don't have them, then perhaps start working together to find some.
Yeah. And have that confidence. Like, I don't know why we're at a point where most parents think they can't even touch the kid's school issued device or look at it, or even go into the classroom was like unheard of for me to go into the classroom and say, can I review my kid's school issued device? That was like really a weird thing to do. But I felt like if my kid's on this, I should be able to know it's on there. So I've created several templates on my website, scrollingtodeath.com, where it's like questions you can ask your school, how to request less screen time, how to request phone-free school, like how to request an opt-out, which you probably won't be successful, but at least you'll have the research to back up some of those conversations. So yeah, I have all of that. Where can listeners connect with you, the Ranch Podcast? Like, where do you want to send people?
Oh, fantastic. So the Ranch Podcast is on Instagram. We also have the Ranch Podcast on YouTube. I hate TikTok, but I was like, why not? So I started.
Matt, I got to talk you out of that.
I know. But like bottom line is I was actually getting content from other adults that were sending me things off of TikTok. I'm like, don't send me TikTok stuff. And they're like, it's fine. They already know. Like they have all our information. Anyway, so yeah, but primarily Instagram and YouTube, you can find me there. And then the program that Officer Gomez and I created and Idaho is going to be using and is already getting rolled out in several school districts across Idaho is fortifyyourkids.com. And you can go understand it. Again, it's parent facing. It's really important. The more parents we have understanding the actual risks involved here, the better off everyone is going to be.
And I love how you guys are approaching those videos, those educational videos. It wasn't like, pussyfooting around. It wasn't like prancing around the issue. Like you're talking right to it. You weren't afraid to it's not fear mongering. It's like telling the true information, the real stories, so that parents understand how much at risk our kids are. And we can start to make safer decisions, not only on the school issued devices, but all of this is also available on the tablets we give our kids at home or their smartphones. Yes. So it's applicable across the board.
And it's not like, to be clear, this is not painful. These videos are not painful. They go super fast. The entire collection of 4 videos is about 25 minutes. You can watch it off your phone while you're like brushing your teeth. They're edited well. I did everything that I do for social media clips to make sure that it's like, we need to push this. So if we get 5 minutes out of somebody, it's the most valuable 5 minutes ever. So yeah, it's a good program.
Thank you for that, because we don't have time for long videos either.
I know, stop. I can't even drive to the middle school. Like I don't have time to watch, hours of stuff.
Yeah. Well, now that I drive my kids 20 minutes each way to their classical charter school, I have a little bit more time, which has actually been nice. I'm not watching videos, but you can listen.
Yeah, absolutely. You absolutely can.
So Matt, thank you so much for this time, and we'll chat again soon.
Thank you. And thank you for what you're doing. I got connected with you because somebody sent me one of your videos. I was like, this woman is on it. And we need that. And for a long period of time, I was trying to come after the exact same thing, but I was covering so many different issues. I was like, I can't do tech safety videos every single day. And I found you and I was like, but this woman can, and she's doing them well. So thank you for what you're doing for the country and potentially the world. Thank you for beating the drum. I so appreciate it.
Thanks, Matt. That's really nice.